All right. Well, good afternoon. I'm Commissioner Cedric Alexander, and I want to share with the community officer-involved shooting that occurred last night on September 20th. At approximately 5:28 p.m., officers from 2nd Precinct were dispatched to the 3400 block of 5th Street Northeast to investigate a 911 hang-up call. And as you well know from experience, that anytime there's a 911 call and there's a hang-up, we automatically respond. The following is based on preliminary information, and let me be clear about this. This is very preliminary in this investigation, and BCA, of course, is conducting this ongoing investigations. Officers observed people inside the residence and attempted to communicate with the individuals through a window once they arrived to the scene. The individuals directed the officers to the rear of the house. The officers located at the rear of the house an unlocked door at the rear of the house and announced their presence as they began to enter. And they did enter the home and did announce their presence. Officers heard cries from distress that was coming from the front of the house. One of the officers was confronted by an adult male pointing a gun at him. Gunfire was exchanged. The officer moved outside. Moments later, one of the individuals inside the house informed officers that an adult male with a gun had shot himself. Officers secured the scene. After going back inside the home, they secured the scene as an adult female, a juvenile female, and a juvenile male were led and safely exit the house under the officers' directions. The officers went back inside the house and identified the adult male to be in his 50s with an apparent fatal gunshot wound while lying on the floor. A gun was recovered. The officer who exchanged gunfire was transported to Hennepin Hospital. He was treated and subsequently released. He sustained some injuries, but he was treated that night and was released. MPD requested that BCA respond. BCA has begun an independent investigation into this incident. Both officers wore body-worn cameras and were on and active. The video will be released following a discussion with the city attorney and BCA, and of course following the rules of our data statute directives and practices. That is pretty much it. I'm more than glad to entertain any questions that you have. I think it's important to remember and recognize this is an ongoing investigation. So what we're able to share certainly is limited, but I certainly want to be able to answer any questions that you may have in regards to this event last night.
Commissioner, was the officer shot?
The officer, from what we can tell right now preliminarily, he did sustain some injuries once the subject fired at him. And there may have been some shrapnel and or some debris that struck him from what I can recall in this incident. However, he is okay, but I think you can only imagine the fact that we have an officer who was shot and injured in the line of duty and was there responding to a 911 call. So the work and the heroism that they displayed was impeccable. And of course, I think it's important that we acknowledge that because they responded to a call with very limited information, 911 hang-up call, responding to that type of call, having to assess that situation very quickly, and then be engaged by a subject who fired upon them. And they, within their right to do so, and adequately trained as they are in the way that they're trained, they followed procedure. Their training was impeccable in terms of their response, and therefore this investigation, as we all well know, from what's being reported thus far, is ongoing. So we're going to see as time goes on what else unfolds, but this is currently what we know at this point.
Do we know how many shots were fired in all? Like, did the suspect or did the man who died?
No, I can't account for the number of shots that were fired. To be honest with you, but there was an exchange of gunfire, and of course we suspect that the subject also died from self-inflicted gunshot wounds.
Can you confirm who fired first?
No, I cannot at this point confirm who fired first, but let's take this scenario, a couple scenarios here. If the subject fired at the officer first, he certainly had the right to protect himself, which he did, by returning fire. And also if the subject pointed a weapon at him, which we reasonably and have reason to believe that he did, the officer here again had the right to protect himself and everybody in and around him, because we also have to remember there were 3 other people that were inside of that house who appeared to be innocent victims that the officers helped lead out of that house once we learned that the subject was down.
Dr. Alexander, was it treated as a domestic violence call or a mental health call or just simply a hang-up call?
From right now, what we know, it appears to have been just a 911 call. And as you well know, anytime we receive a 911 call, we immediately respond. And we may attempt to call back. If we don't get a response, certainly we send officers to that scene anyway. And then last night was an example of that, where there was a 911 hang-up, officers responded to the scene, and the rest was as I have articulated thus far.
Can you confirm where the cries of distress were coming from? Were the children, the adults, and what then may have led up?
From what we can gather right now, there were 3 young people in the house, and we believe one of those cries did come from one of the young people inside the house once the officers arrived to the scene, and that's what they followed. They followed those cries of help, and that was the reason why they entered an unlocked back door to the house, announcing themselves as they went in. And they did exactly what they were trained to do under those types of circumstances in that particular type of event. Yes, sir. Oh, I thought you had a question.
Oh, I tried to do that, sorry.
Yeah.
How close range were this, or how fortunate was the officer?
I'm sorry, what was that again?
How close range answering that door was the officer? So,
Yeah, from what I could gather thus far from the investigation, very initially, and this is all very preliminary, this was very close contact. We're talking about a home here. We're not talking about outside. They were inside a residence. So it probably is typical as most shootings that occur in this country, they probably would be within 10 feet of each other, roughly. And that is very close proximity for an officer to be fired up on at that closer range, and certainly could have lost his life in this. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Can you tell at this point in that initial exchange of gunfire, was the person that shot themselves, right, or after, was that person, they weren't hit in that initial exchange of gunfire?
Well,
It's a little-
yeah, and that is a great question, but I don't think we will know that until there has been a coroner's inquiry, coroner's investigation. Of course, Hennepin County Coroner's Office is doing their part of the investigation, and they will conclude at the end of their investigation what was the cause of death.
So just to kind of clarify, they get the call, they go, they're in, there's the exchange with the person, there's shots fired.
Yes.
The officer was injured by shrapnel. We don't know if the person who ultimately took their own life was injured at that moment. But after the exchange, the
Right.
officers went out, then the man went in and, at this point, took.
We believe took his own life. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes,
So I'm
ma'am.
just making sure I'm getting the.
I think you got the gist of it. And here again, don't want to get too far ahead of my skis. This is preliminary investigation, but everything that we understand up to this point is what I'm stating here. Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry for dominating.
You're not.
Do we know this home? Have officers had experience with this family? Do we know that?
I really don't know that. Certainly, we can make that determination and make some determination if we, if this has been a place we've frequented before. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, what time did this happen again yesterday?
We're reportedly approximately 5:28 p.m. on yesterday.
And we don't
Why,
know.
why did we get a press release at 1:30 in the morning regarding this? Why did it take so long?
Well, probably because it was late in the afternoon. You got to remember, this is an ongoing investigation. This was a very sensitive investigation. So I think by the time that they were able to pull all the information together, quite frankly and honestly, it probably was 1 o'clock in the morning. It could have been later, but I think it's important that we gather as much information. For me, it's very important. It's very important for all of us to gather as much information as solidly as we can to make sure that what I tell you is as factual as we know up to this point. So I'm very confident in what I'm reporting to you today. So the length of the reporting is not based on anything, or never should be alluded to that it's being based on anything except for the fact we're trying to make sure we're gathering as much concrete information that we can to share with you all. Any other questions?
Is the officer on leave right now?
Relationships between the people in the house?
We believe that there were family members that were there, and that's all I know right now.
Is the
Yes.
officer on leave right now?
Yes, they automatically become on leave anytime they're involved in a shooting. You guys have been great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
I just want to say hello to several times, Susie Jones, and I'm a reporter at WCCO Radio.
God bless you.
Welcome to.
Yes, very nice meeting you. Thanks a lot for coming out. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Oh, the old press release after George Floyd died, the bad press release.
How was last night?
I'm just saying, can I go in front, you guys? Okay, goodbye.